In this lecture video, we are going to now focus on policy and a proposition of policy, looking at both building the affirmative and the negative case. So first we will look at the affirmative case and the objective and the different requirements for the affirmative case. Then we will dive into the negative case and building the negative case for a proposition of policy. So the main focus here is policy and looking at the affirmative and the negative case and the different requirements for them. So let's go ahead and jump right into the affirmative case, and first and foremost, the objective of the affirmative case. So the objective of the affirmative case for a proposition of policy is to maintain that a certain policy or course of action should be adopted. More blatantly put, the affirmative contends that a change to the status quo is needed. The affirmative must come up with a resolution to this issue. Now, with the affirmative case, there are different requirements, specifically 5 requirements that we will be discussing in today's lecture video. So one of the first requirements of the affirmative case for a proposition of policy is to prove that there is harm taking place. So to establish harm, you want to give a brief overview of what undesirable things are happening in the status quo without your advocacy. So keep it short and overview the problems, but this is your opportunity to let the audience know and let your opponents know, hey, we need to enact change because this is harmful, and you need to provide why it's harmful. The second requirement is to prove the inherency. This is the reason the problem is not getting better on its own. There are different inherencies that you could argue. So first, there is a structural inherency, meaning that there is something actively preventing the problem from getting better. Second, we have gap inherency. You argue that the present system is aware that the problem exists, but the steps in place fail to solve the existing harms. Basically, you're stating that what we are currently doing to fix it is not working. And then finally, we have attitudinal inherency. This inherency argues that there are beliefs or attitudes that prevent things from getting better. Number 3, we have requirement to prove the solvency. After the plan has been presented, you could give specifics about how the plan will work or be implemented. It would be good to specify funding, a timeline, and enforcement. The more clear your plan is, the better, because the negative will want to go through and poke holes in all of your plan. It may even be helpful to look at previous policies enacted, maybe in different states, in different countries that have demonstrated a positive outcome for society. Fourth, we have requirements to defend topicality or the plan. This is probably one of the most important parts of a policy debate. You must know what precisely you want a plan to say. You should provide a hypothetical policy action. One of the major burdens is to be topical. This means that you must present a plan that falls within the boundaries set within the resolution. A plan that falls short or an action that fails to follow the resolution will cause you to lose the debate. An unpractical plan or unclear plan, for instance, will result in a loss. So the affirmative must create a resolution, write out a clear plan, and discuss what is the agent of change and the action you want to employ. So you should be answering that. What is the agent of change and the action you want to employ? And as we mentioned with solvency, be as clear as possible. Fifth requirement to prove the advantages. So these are structured 4-part subcategories. So first, you're going to want to provide uniqueness. This is a description of a specific undesirable thing happening in the status quo. We would not need to enact change if there weren't differences in opinions on the issue in the first place. This is the affirmative's opportunity to state the issues occurring. This is important as later you will need to describe how to improve the status quo with your plan. Use facts and statistics to support your uniqueness. Second, you must provide a link argument. Tell us that your plan will pass and change something. This will reduce the places where your opponent can attack you. Third, we have internal links. So the goal is to explain what takes place after the passage of your plan. How will your plan improve society? If the plan you are enacting has been used in other instances, you could argue that it worked here, for instance. Fourth, you must provide impact. This is where you will show us how your plan is overall beneficial for society. These are all very, very important. So the overall theme of the requirement for the proving the advantages is telling us, hey, what are the benefits? Because later on, the negative is going to try to demonstrate the disadvantages. So this is really an essential portion of your plan, is saying, hey, these are the benefits we will reap as a society. These are the benefits you will reap, and so on and so forth. Because the negative later on is going to come in and attack all of those. Okay, so that is the affirmative. We have the 5. So requirement to prove the harm, requirement to prove the inherency, requirement to prove the solvency, requirement to defend topicality, the plan, and requirement to prove the advantages of said plan. Now let's dive into the negative case, more specifically building the negative case for proposition of policy. Now, as we previously discussed in our other video related to proposition of value, the burden of rebuttal rests on the negative. So you'll note within the negative's requirements, a lot of it is attacking what we just went over for the affirmative. So the goal of the negative case is essentially to attack the plan that the affirmative suggests. Or it could also be to have a counter plan in mind, or to demonstrate, yeah, there is an issue, but the affirmative's plan is not well suited enough to accomplish this task or change this issue. So the negative is completely against the affirmative's plan in itself and poking holes in it, essentially. So with the negative, there are different ways that the negative can attack the affirmative. So first, they may attack the topicality of the issue. So in debate over policy propositions, the question of topicality is strictly a question of the plan and whether it represents the action called for in the language of the proposition. If the negative wins the topicality issue, it generally wins the debate. It is the one issue that if won by the negative, it usually means the debate is won by the negative. For instance, if the negative breaks down or pokes significant holes in the plan proposed by the affirmative will definitely lose. This is why it is so important that the affirmative creates a solid, strong plan. Next, they may attack the harm. So here the negative could argue that the affirmative has not established harm. The affirmative must argue how the status quo is harmful. If the affirmative does not do this, the negative now is given the opportunity to showcase the harm and how it's not inherent within the debate or significant to the debate at all. The negative could also argue that the harm is overstated or that the affirmative is overestimating it. For instance, the negative could state that the amount of people impacted is not severe to the degree that the affirmative is trying to argue that it is. So that is attacking the harm. Next, we have that they can attack the inherency. The negative here could argue that the plan offered by the affirmative is not needed, justified, or even that the plan is irrelevant to the issue. Again, this goes back to attacking the plan as a whole and poking holes in it. So you're essentially saying, nope, it's not justified, it's not needed, or it's just completely irrelevant overall. Next, they may attack solvency. The negative attempts to prove that the plan will not work, that even if it works exactly as the affirmative wants it to, it will not solve the harm or achieve the advantages claimed, and that the advantages are not significant or compelling. They might attack the overall workability of the plan, that it will not achieve the claimed advantages, or even may dismiss that the advantages claimed by the affirmative are not of significance whatsoever. Then fifth, we have prove disadvantages. So proving disadvantages is one of the most important arguments in most policy debates. This is the negative's offense. They offer reasons that adoption of the affirmative plan would be bad. They must weigh out the benefits and costs of the said plan and demonstrate that the disadvantages outweigh the advantages of the plan. For instance, in raising minimum wage, one of the disadvantages the negative could argue is inflation and how the cost of living would go up. The negative would need to promote as many disadvantages as possible or as needed. Sixth, we have develop the counter plan. Next, the negative could offer a counter plan to the issue. A counter plan is a plan presented by the negative, one that is competitive with the affirmative's plan and is a superior policy alternative. This allows the negative to side that there is an issue. So they note, hey, yeah, there is an issue. However, the affirmative plan is weak or lacking, and that the resolution the negative has in mind exceeds the affirmative's plan. Finally, we have attack the critique. So finally, the negative may choose to develop a critique. It is an argument that challenges the philosophical foundations or applies ethical constructs to the opponent's advocacy and its implications. In essence, the critique is a value objection used in a policy debate. The argument is structured much like a disadvantage and is argued as an absolute voting issue. Critique may be based on attack on some aspects of the opposing advocate's performance, such as language use or underlying presumptions or the resolution or their proposal overall. So as you can see here, looking at the 7 elements we just discussed for the negative, a good portion of it is attacking the overall plan, looking at the topicality of the plan, looking at the harm, the inherency, the solvency, but also the negative is given the opportunity to provide a counter plan. So this may be something that you do decide to do with your group members later on in the term when you are given this debate. So that's just something to keep in mind. So the affirmative, therefore, change, they're against the status quo. They're saying, hey, we need to enact change. And then the negative doesn't necessarily need to side with the status quo. They can definitely say, hey, yeah, there are issues, but they're mostly attacking the affirmative's case or the affirmative's plan. But the negative could also side with the status quo in itself and say, no, the status quo is clearly working. The status quo is the status quo for a specific reason. So the negative could take so many routes in either agreeing with status quo or even creating a counter argument stating that, hey, yeah, there are issues with this specific policy. We do need to enact change, but the affirmative essentially has it all wrong. And this is what we actually need to do. So hopefully this gives you a better understanding of a policy debate and the difference between a value and a policy debate, but also more specifically, the different requirements for the affirmative case and the negative case when building a proposition of policy. So in looking at the different outlines and the different briefs for the affirmative and negative, they are very, 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 very different. So again, affirmative, you're creating a plan. Negative, you're poking holes in that plan, essentially. So hopefully this helps. If you have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to email me, and I will see you all in the next one.